right, my dear children? Now, in this situation, right, you are given with an activity. Here we are going to find out whether we can hear all the sounds in our environment. Here we are going to find out whether we can hear all the sounds in our environment. So, can we hear all the sounds in our environment? The answer is no. We can't hear all the sounds in our environment. So, to understand that situation, we'll conduct this activity. So, this activity is simple. So, you will be needing these instruments. We need a long hacksaw blade. If you don't have a hacksaw blade with you, you can find or you can get a ruler, a long ruler as well. Okay? The hacksaw blade is very good because that when hacksaw blade is vibrating, we can hear the sound quite well. So, hacksaw blade is the most appropriate one for this activity. If you can't find a one, then a ruler is also okay. Then we need a G-clamp. We need a G-clamp. A clamp is okay. A clamp is okay. So, if you can't find a G-clamp or else any kind of a clamp, you can just use your hand to do this activity, right? So, we need a hacksaw blade and a G-clamp to conduct this activity in a proper manner. So, this is the method. So, here you are given with two figures. If you check now this is the G-clamp. Here you can observe the G-clamp, right? This part, this is, right? Now, G-clamp is fixed to the wall in here. It's been fixed. G-clamp is like this. Has a shape of G like this, right? Has a shape like G, right? So, you can fix the hacksaw blade into the G-clamp and we can fix it like this. This is the hacksaw blade. Okay. There is a certain tool, a device which can rotate and we can fix it to the G-clamp, right? So, now let's see how to conduct this activity. So, we need that G-clamp and we need to fix that, right? We need to fix that G-clamp on the hacksaw blade like this. So, in the first instance, you can see the blade, see the length of the blade outside the G-clamp in the first figure, and if you check the second figure, length of the blade, you can see there is a difference. So, here in the second figure, the hacksaw blade which located outside the G-clamp has a less length. Length is less in this situation. In this situation, the hacksaw blade outside the G-clamp has a greater length. So, clamp the hacksaw blade to the table. Keep the free end of the blade longer. Now this is blade is longer. Blade is longer, right? So, clamp the hacksaw blade to the table. Keep the free end of the blade longer. So, I'll include free end as well. Free end of the blade is longer. free end of the blade is longer, right? So after that we need to vibrate the blade and listen. We need to vibrate. You can push the blade down and release it. Okay, you can push this blade down and release it. So that's how you can listen to the sound when the blade is vibrating, when the free end of the blade is longer, right? Then once again you have to reclamp the blade, making its free end somewhat shorter in this situation. In the figure 2 you can observe it. Then vibrate it again and listen. So here you can see the second instance, free end of the blade, free end of the blade is shorter. So free end of the blade is shorter in the second figure. In the second figure you can observe free end of the blade is shorter. See, compare the two images carefully, here and here. Children, compare these two images carefully. You can see the difference, right? You can see the difference very clearly. So now we need to vibrate. In these two instances the hacksaw blade should be vibrated in these two instances separately. Then we need to listen to the sound emitted in the two situations very carefully. Okay, we need to listen to the sound emitted very carefully in this activity. So right, my dear children, now let's move on to the lab and we'll conduct this experiment and we'll see whether the expected observation could be obtained or not. In this activity, we are going to find out whether we can hear any frequency. So in this activity, we need a G clamp like this. This is referred as the G clamp, this one, the red color one, you can observe it. So it has a shape of G. So I can pull this, I can turn this lever to either sides in order to tight or loosen whatever the material which is fixed onto the G clamp. So this is the use of the G clamp. Now I have fixed a hacksaw blade onto this G clamp by using two wooden blocks. I have fixed it, so it's not going to move here and there when I am vibrating it. Now you could observe from this wooden block, it has some kind of a length, right? It has some kind of a length. Okay, now I am going to vibrate and see whether we can hear a sound or not. So I am going to vibrate this thing and we'll see whether we can hear a sound when it is vibrating or not. So observe, children, very carefully. So you can observe that even though the blade is vibrating, there is no distinct sound which we can hear, right? See, the blade vibrates. Blade is going to move up and down. It's going to vibrate. The blade is vibrating up and down, but still no sound is going to emit. right? See, there is no sound. Now what I am going to do is I am going to reduce the length which is outside. So I am going to reduce it by turning this G clamp somewhat, and so I am going to reduce it, the length. Okay. So you can see that now I have reduced the length of it. So I am going to fix it once again. Right. So now let's see whether we can hear a sound in this situation or not. So I'm going to vibrate it. Observe, my dear children, observe the sound very carefully. So I'll reduce the length even more so that you can get a very clear observation. Right. And now let's vibrate and see. See? Now in this situation we can hear the sound very clearly, and also we can observe the vibration of the hacksaw blade as well. Right? Now in the earlier case, when the length is somewhat greater, rather than this one, we took a greater length. So in that situation, we couldn't hear any kind of a sound. It's because that even though the blade is vibrating in that instance, we can't hear a sound because in that situation, the vibrational frequency is out of our hearing range. We can't hear it because it is out of our range. But when we reduce the length of the hacksaw blade, we can hear a sound when I am going to vibrate it. You know that when the length is going to decrease in a material which is vibrating, the frequency is increasing. When I am going to decrease the length, the frequency of the hacksaw blade which is vibrating is going to increase when I am going to decrease the length. So in that situation, during that vibration, that vibrational power or that vibrational energy is within our hearing range. So when I'm going to reduce the length, I could hear the sound, but when I'm going to increase the length, I can't hear a sound. So that was our observation. So by this way, we can conclude that we can't hear all the sounds in our environment. There are some certain vibrations, there are some certain sounds which we can't hear as they are not in our hearing range. So our observation. What is our observation? No sound is heard though the longer blade is vibrating. Even though the longer end is going to vibrate, we can't hear a sound. Even though it is vibrating, we can't hear a sound. Right? In the first figure, now in the first figure, right? In the first figure, you could remember the hacksaw blade is somewhat longer, and in the second figure, it was shorter. In the first instance, it was lengthier, and in the second instance, it was shorter. So, when the hacksaw blade is somewhat lengthier, when vibrating in that instance, we can't hear a clear sound. No sound could be heard, right? So, no sound is heard though the longer blade is vibrating. We can see that longer blade is vibrating, but we can't hear the sound. That's the case, right? So what is my conclusion? Before coming to the conclusion, I'll write what happens in the second one as well, right? Let's see what happens in the second one then. So we know that in the first instance, right? In the first instance, we could hear the sound, we couldn't hear the sound, right? So in this case, we couldn't hear the sound, right? Let's see. So the other observation is when the hacksaw blade is somewhat shorter, we can hear the sound very well. When the blade is short, sound is heard. When the blade is short, sound is heard. So what is the reason for this? Let me recall what happens when increasing or decreasing the length of the vibrated part. In the earlier chapter, we discussed during the musical instruments, we discussed that when increasing the length of the vibrated part, frequency is going to reduce. When increasing the length, frequency is going to reduce. So when length is short or when the length is less, we can increase, or the frequency is getting increased. The frequency is getting increased when length is less. So in this situation, the longer blade, when the blade is longer, we can say that the frequency is low. So therefore, according to this experiment, we can finally conclude there is a limit in hearing frequencies for the human ear. We can't hear all the frequencies. Some smaller frequencies cannot be heard clearly by using our ears. So in conclusion, we can say that we can hear only the sound of certain range in vibrations. So this is our final conclusion from this activity. We can hear only certain range of vibrations. We can hear only certain amount of frequency, right? We can hear only certain amount of frequency. We can't hear other frequencies. When that frequency amount is somewhat low, we can't hear those things, right? So we can hear only the sound of a certain range of vibrations, right? We can hear only a certain range of vibration. So before I'm going to enter that thing, I'm going to write down my conclusion from this experiment. So my conclusion is, what is my conclusion? My final conclusion is, we can hear only certain frequencies. We can hear only certain frequencies. We can hear only or else we can say that like this. In short, we can't hear all frequencies. We can't hear sounds with all frequencies. So that is my final conclusion. We can't hear sounds with all frequencies. Means that we can hear only the sounds of a certain range of vibrations. Means only to a certain range of frequency. Right? We can hear only to a certain range of frequencies. We can't hear all the range of frequencies in sound. So, that range which we can hear, is called as or is known as the limits of hearing. That's the limit of our hearing. Right. So, my dear children, the normal hearing range of human, actually it should be human, not humans. So, normal hearing range of human is from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Normal hearing range of human is from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Let me recall, what do you mean by the frequency, right? Or this 1 hertz thing. Let's see, what do you mean by this 1 hertz? If you take 1 hertz, frequency of 1 hertz, that means the particle or the instrument or the thing is vibrating 1 round or 1 vibration or 1 oscillation within 1 second. So 20 hertz means that particle or the instrument or the thing is vibrating 20 times or oscillating 20 times within 1 second. So, in the earlier case, when no sound is heard, it's because that in that situation, hacksaw blade is not vibrating at least at 20 hertz. The hacksaw blade should vibrate at least 20 times per 1 second, or else it would prefer to have more vibrations than 20 within 1 second. If that blade is not vibrating at least to have 20 oscillations, then we can't hear those sounds. So that's the main reason why that hacksaw blade would not emit a sound that is sensible to our ears, that is sensitive to our ears, right? The hacksaw blade is not going to emit a sound which is sensitive to our ears. It's because that frequency of the sound which emitted on that situation is less than 20 hertz. So, next thing, the final vibration that we could hear is 20,000 hertz. Means that that instrument or the thing is vibrating 20,000 times within 1 second. 20,000 times within 1 second, right? So that's the maximum frequency that we could hear. Beyond this limit, we can't hear. Less than 20, that in that limit also we can't hear. Beyond 20,000, we can't hear. If it is less than 20 hertz, in that instance also we can't hear. So the sound which is emitting should have a frequency between 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz in order to emit a sound which is sensitive to our ears, right? So man cannot hear sounds of the frequency which is less than 20 hertz or more than 20,000 hertz, right? The sounds which, if you take the sounds which are less than 20 hertz, sounds less than 20 hertz. If a sound is less than 20 hertz, then these sounds are called, my dear children, these sounds are called as infrasound. These sounds are called as infrasound. Infrasound. These sounds are called as infrasound. Okay? Then the other thing, if the sound has a frequency more than, if a sound has more than 20,000 hertz of a frequency, if a sound has more than 20,000 of a frequency, 20,000 hertz, right? Sounds more than 20,000 hertz, these sounds are called as ultrasound. Ultrasound, right? So my dear children, these sounds are called as ultrasound. Infrasound and ultrasound. Infra means less. Ultra means high. Infra means less. Ultra means high. Okay? So, sounds less than 20 hertz are called as infrasound. Sounds more than 20,000 hertz are called as ultrasound. Okay. So, we can hear only sounds that has frequency between 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. We can't hear infrasounds and we can't hear ultrasounds, right? So, this is called as the hearing range of the human. Hearing range of the human, right? So, if you move on with the next thing here, some animals are sensitive to sounds which we can't hear. There are some animals which are sensitive to these sounds. What sounds? Infrasounds and ultrasounds. There are some certain animals which are sensitive to infra and ultrasounds. Some animals can even navigate by using these ultrasounds, right? They can find the pathway. By using ultrasound. By using the ultrasound, they can find the pathway to move here and there, especially in the dark. They can navigate by using these ultrasound waves. Right. So some animals are sensitive to sounds which we can't hear. Dog can hear sounds of the frequency which is less than 20 hertz or more than 20,000 hertz. So hearing range of human is from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. We studied that thing earlier. But if you take a dog can hear not between 20 to 20,000, but dog can hear up to less sounds than 20 hertz or else more frequency sounds than 20,000 hertz. Right? That's why even if we can't hear any kind of a sound, your dogs are very sensitive to very small sounds. Even if a leaf drops down to earth from a tree, your dog can sense that sound. It's because that they can hear those infrasounds. Right. So bat can hear the sounds of higher frequencies up to 70,000 hertz. Bats can hear up to 70,000 hertz. It means that 50,000 hertz more than our final hearing limit. More than 50,000 hertz. So it's a heavy range, right? It's a heavy range. And there is another thing, you know, that bats can navigate by using these sounds. In earlier, I told you that these sounds are called as ultrasound. So by using this ultrasound, bats can navigate. Bats can even navigate in the dark, right? So in the dark, bats navigate by using ultrasound waves. They can find the pathway by using these sound waves, right? So you are given with a figure. In this figure, the different types of animals are given with different types of frequencies, right? So here there is human, see, there is human, and there are several animals in this range like the cockroach, bees, and several birds, the frogs, crocodile, dogs, and elephants who can hear these types of sound. And the range is also given. The hearing range is also given, right? So this part is the limit of human. This part is the limit of human. Actually, now we say that we can hear from 20 to 20,000 hertz. But if you come to the real world, right? If you come to the real world and if you take several people, most of the people are not sensible to 20 hertz of a sound. It's very low. If you take 20 hertz of a sound, it's very low sound. We can't hear it. That's the actual situation if you come to the world. But we say that normally we can hear from 20 to 20,000 hertz, right? So, but in normal situations, 20 hertz cannot be heard very clearly. Okay, right? So, we'll see this thing once again. So, here there are several animals with several frequencies. Now, at the bottom, there is a whale. This is the whale. Whale. Whale is a special animal. Very special animal, whale, right? Whale can hear what sounds? These are called as infrasound. Infrasonic means sound, okay? So, whale can hear infrasound, sounds which has less frequency than 20 hertz, right? Whale can hear those sounds. right? Then there is bat. See, bat. This is bat. And there is another special mammal. There is another special mammal, the dolphins. Dolphins are also a type of animal that use these ultrasounds. Ultrasounds means the sounds that has more frequency than 20,000 hertz. So this is the 20,000 hertz limit. This is the 20 hertz limit, right? So beyond that level, we can't hear, but bat and the dolphin can hear those ultrasounds. Both of these animals use these ultrasounds to navigate, especially dolphins. Dolphins are some kind of animals who going to visit some different places when they are living in the aquatic environment. But even though they are going to live several kilometers, they can clearly find, or they can find their way back without any trouble, or they can find their way back to the original birthplace or to the original place where the dolphin lived for a longer time period. It's because that dolphins use ultrasound waves. Now, researchers have said that dolphins are very sensitive to sounds in the ocean. So, there are some cases which the people have been saved by the dolphins during some shark attacks and those sort of stuffs, right? It's because that dolphins are very sensitive to sound. So, dolphin is a mammal who is living in sea, which use these ultrasounds to navigate and to do their work stuff as well. Right. So, these are some animals which can hear or which is sensitive to these sounds we called as, or we refer as, infra and ultra sounds. Infrasound means sounds that has a frequency less than 20 hertz. Ultrasound means sounds that has more than 20,000 hertz. Right. Now there is a special thing, another special thing. Here you can see there is a thing given in here. See children, there is thing given in here, KHZ. You know what do you mean by hertz? Hertz is represented by this capital H and simple Z unit. There is another thing in here, simple K and HZ. Simple K and HZ. So this is called as kilohertz. This unit is called as kilohertz. This is called as kilohertz. Kilohertz. Like kilograms. If you take kilograms are like that way. Now 1000 grams are equal to 1 kilogram. Like that way 1000 hertz are equal to 1 kilohertz. 1000 hertz is equal to 1 kilohertz. 1000 hertz is equal to 1 kilohertz. Okay, remember that. 1000 hertz is equal to 1 kilohertz. So here different ranges are given. Bat 2 kilohertz to 120 kilohertz. I told you earlier, bats can hear or they use up to 70,000, but the hearing range of a bat is 120,000 hertz. 120,000 hertz. Here kilo means 1000. So dolphin from 75 hertz to 150,000 hertz. So like that way there are several things right? There are several things given in this figure about the sound that is sensitive to different types of animals, right? So my dear children, now we came to the end of our lesson. So the hearing range part is the final lesson part which you need to learn on this 5th chapter, right? So now let me remind you what are the things we learned in this lesson. So I have prepared you a summary, a small summary to discuss what are the things that we learned during this lesson. So first of all, we discussed about the things that produce sound. First of all, we discussed about the things which produce sound. The things which produce sound is called sources of sound. So here, instruments or the things that produce sound are called sources of sound. Those things are called as sources of sound. Then we divided those sources of sound into several categories. We divided those sources of sounds into several categories. There were artificial sounds, natural sounds, noises, musical tones. Like that way there are several things. So we divide natural and artificial sounds first. So all the artificial and natural sounds are emitting their sound by the vibration of strings or rods. Rods means here metal plates. So by the vibration of strings or metal rods, sound is being produced. No matter whether it is artificial or no matter whether it is natural, all the sounds are being emitted by the vibration of strings or rods, or by membranes, or else by air columns, Here metal bars are also a type. Okay, metal bars are also a type. Bars are also correct. So that thing also belong to the vibration of strings, rod or bars. Then after that, we discussed about the frequency. So frequency of a sound means the number of vibrations of a sound source produced in unit time. Frequency means the number of vibrations of a sound source which produced in unit time. Here unit time means exactly within 1 second. Exactly within 1 second. Okay, unit time means 1 second. We are checking how much is the number of oscillations, how much is the number of vibrations within 1 second in frequency. Then we studied about the international standard unit. International standard unit. So international or the SI unit, standard international or else international standard. So international unit of frequency is hertz. We measure the frequency of a sound source by using the international standard unit called hertz. Capital H, simple Z. And like several minutes earlier, we discussed that there is a one subunit to measure the frequency of a sound, which called as kilohertz. So I'll mention that thing as well. There is a one subunit to measure the frequency that is called as kilohertz. kilohertz. So 1000 hertz is equal to 1 kilohertz. 1000 hertz are equal to 1 kilohertz. So this unit, another subunit to measure frequency is kilohertz. If there are heavy vibrations, I mean like if there are a large number of vibrations, we use the term called kilohertz, or we use the unit called kilohertz to measure the vibrational frequency, right? Okay. So man cannot hear the sound of any frequency. Now in the earlier activity we discussed that man cannot hear any frequency of a sound. Any frequency of a sound cannot be heard by man. There is a certain limit of hearing. So there is a limited range of frequency of sound that man can hear. There is a certain limit of hearing. There is a certain limit of hearing for the man, right? Humans have a certain limit of hearing. This is called as the hearing range of human. This is called as the hearing range of the human, right? So the limits of hearing range, the limits of hearing of human is 20 to 20,000 hertz. The limit of hearing of human is 20 to 20,000 hertz. So I'll use that kilohertz thing, this kilohertz unit, to mention the hearing range. So 20 hertz is 20 hertz, you can't change that thing. So we can say this thing as 20 hertz to 20,000. Instead of 1000, you can apply kilo unit. So it is 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Instead of 1000, you can apply the kilo thing. So 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz is also appropriate for our hearing range. Okay. Sometimes in some books, not in our textbook, but in some different books, if you are going to refer them, the hearing range would be given like this also. So remember, kilo means 1000. Kilohertz means 1000 of hertz. So our hearing range can be given another way by using 20 hertz to 20,000 kilohertz. Right. Then the next one. There are 3 categories of musical instruments. There are 3 categories of musical instruments. What are those? According to the part that vibrates. According to the part that vibrates, there are 3 types of musical instruments. So what are those? So those sources are musical instruments that produce sound by vibration of a string, or else a metal bar, or else a metal plate. Musical instrument that produce sound by the vibration of a membrane. Musical instruments that produce sound by the vibration of air columns. Musical instrument that produce sound by vibration of strings, metal plates or rods. Musical instruments that produce sound by the vibration of a membrane. Musical instrument that produce sound by the vibration of air columns. So those are the 3 main categories of musical instrument. Not like the musical instrument, we discussed that any kind of a sound source is producing sound according to those 3 ways. One of those 3 ways is the source of their sound. Right. So sound produced can be changed by adjusting the vibrating parts of musical instruments. By adjusting means tuning. Tuning means here we are changing the frequency. So to change the frequency, we discussed that in a string instrument means an instrument that produces sound by the vibration of strings. We can change the thickness, or else length of the string, or else tension of the string. Thickness and length are inversely related or opposite related with the frequency. Means that when increase in the thickness, when increase in the length, frequency reduce. When reduce in the frequency, intensity of the sound also reduce. When decrease in the thickness, when decrease in the length, frequency increases. When increase in the frequency, more intense sound can be heard. Right. In the next one, the tension. Tension is directly related with the frequency of a sound. Means that when increase in the tension of the string, the frequency also increases. When decrease in the tension of the strings, frequency also decreases. Okay. So, according to the frequency, intensity of the sound is also changed. In instruments which vibrates membranes to produce sound, we can change the thickness of the membrane and the tension of the membrane. So, the same procedure will happen in those instances as well when producing sound. Same thing would happen like in the musical instrument which produce sound by the vibration of strings. Same thing would happen. Tension will, if you are going to increase the tension, then the frequency would increase. If you are going to decrease the tension, then the frequency would decrease. Right? So, that's with the musical instrument that vibrates membranes. Then in the third one, the musical instrument that vibrates air column to produce sound. So, in that situation, length of the air column is going to determine the frequency. So, when the length is high or when length is more, when the length of the air column is more, frequency is reduced. When reducing the frequency, intensity of the sound also reduce. In the second case, when length of the air column is less, frequency is high. When high the frequency, intensity of the sound is also high. Right. So, my dear children, that's how we can change the frequency of musical instruments. That's how we can adjust the frequency of musical instruments. Then finally, finally we discussed about the sound which can be used to improve the quality of life by using that musical therapy treatments. So, we discussed in that part, we can use music to treat patients with different diseases, especially here mental stress and mental disabilities and nervous issues, right? So, that's all about with the lesson that we have studied under the sound. So, in next chapter, we'll be discussing the exercises and some questions related to this lesson.